Hello everyone, and welcome back to Gates to Chaos, where we discuss the paranormal, magic, and all things that go bump in the night. I'm your host, the Gatekeeper. Tonight, we'll be opening up another gate of Magick. The previous two episodes, we've discussed the basic four elements, some tools that go along with them, and some terminology. On this episode, we're going to be discussing one of my favorite subjects on which to debate and discuss with other practitioners. We're going to be talking about the quintessence, that ever-elusive fifth element that has been present in a multitude of cultures around the world. Some basic circle casting and compass casting techniques and the difference between the two, and also their similarities. Before we really get started, I need to add just a little bit of a preface to this subject. The fifth element is something that can vary depending on your tradition. Some traditions, you don't even work with a fifth element. It's one that is a little hard to define, and depending on your religious background, it can change. It's something that is entirely up for debate, and my views on it may differ from your views on it or the next practitioner's views on it. And I'm not saying in this podcast that I am absolutely 100% right, that there's no variation, there's no going against me or anything like that, but I will be sharing my views on this subject, and as such they may be completely out in left field compared to what you may have encountered in your research and studies. So what is the quintessence? As I like to call it, ether, but in other traditions you'll see spirit, mana, which wasn't originally a fantasy term, by the way, the serpent's force, witch power, what have you. In my opinion, the quintessence is essentially pure magic. It is what makes your rituals, your spells, manifest in unexpected ways. It is what makes it volatile. It is unmanifested cosmos. The quintessence is what the gods are made up of, what they use in order to help shape this reality, to lend power to your rituals when you call on them. It is what travels down the axis mundi through the various realms in order to structure the universe, how it is represented here in this reality. And I know I keep using the term axis mundi, and so I need to describe what that is. It's kind of like the ceremonial magic way of describing the world tree. It is the energy source that travels down from the higher realms to us and then to the lower realms. So if you think of the universe or our reality as a sphere, the void is the material that holds it together it has the capacity to hold everything. So the sphere itself is black. But in the center is a vertical beam of light that bisects it. And it starts off spread out at the top and spread out at the bottom, and it condenses in the middle. And in that middle is where you would find us. In various traditions, you will find this reference to the void and the light, or the dark and the light. It is something that just keeps popping up. In Norse mythology, there was an androgynous giant named Ymir who sweated out the gods and the other giants. Essentially, like, both the gods and the giants are the same beings, but one side wants to keep things as the formless chaos, which is what Ymir embodied. And the Aesir, or the Vanir, didn't. They wanted to help structure things. In, I believe it was Mesopotamia, their origin story was everything came from a great dragon who was butchered, and the universe was created out of her corpse. And so she was the great mother that all was made from and everything. In Christianity, the first thing that God did was separate the light and the dark. So it's just this theme that keeps popping up. But it is my belief that the fifth element is what the gods pump into your ritual space if you work with them. I choose not to. But it is what the gods bring to the table when you call upon them for aid to help empower your rites. You are connecting it, your magic, to the primal source, so to speak. And it is what they breathe into the ritual. Now, I do believe that since this is an element, that it is entirely possible to bypass the whole God step if you choose. Now, one thing that I do dislike about modern magic, modern practitioners, is everything is human-centric. That essentially nothing would exist without humans to perceive it, or something of that nature. I disagree with that. Even in the gods, I do believe that maybe some gods, maybe all, are just archetypes that we assigned to that primal source in order to humanize it and make it better to connect with. Even if they were originally created that way, they're still beings in their own rights. And as anyone who has made a servitor can tell you, is they don't always continue to follow the programming that you assign them. So when I say that I choose personally to usually bypass the calling on the gods and everything, I'm not saying that they don't exist for me. I'm not saying that I don't respect them. I'm just saying that for my magic, I like the idea, the thought, that the only thing that is affecting how my magic manifests is my own will and my own skill. But the fifth element, this divine light that we either call on the gods for or that we tap into directly. In several traditions, it is not something that we were meant to have. Man was not originally planned out in whichever creature or universe or evolution's eyes that helped create us. Man was not originally planned out to be able to do magic. That's why no matter who gave us the ability to do it, the gods were still angry about it. Prometheus gave us fire. In the in certain Christian mythos, Lucifer gave us the fruit of knowledge and everything, but he was not the one that taught us magic. It was the ones that originally created the Nephilim, the ones that looked upon man's daughters and found them comely, and then created that half-breed. But before they started to fornicate with us, they taught us how to work with plants, how to enchant, how to access that divine spark. And some believe that that is where the witch blood originates, depending on which tradition. And in traditional witchcraft, because a lot of it kind of ties back to Christianity, since that is what kind of won out in those regions, that's going to be the mythos that they connect to. But whether we were supposed to have it or not, it doesn't matter. We have it now. If you are a practitioner that likes to try and explain your magic away in terms of science, whether it's quantum physics or what have you, you can think of the fifth element as remnant energies from the Big Bang that permeate the universe. I personally believe that the reason why the earth has, as they're called in traditional witchcraft, serpent lines, which is what you could think of as ley lines, except these are not gridded in such a way, but they're these lines that the witch power, the serpent's force, courses through the earth and that you can tap into. But one of the reasons why I believe that the earth has a higher amount of this is, I think that gravity draws and collects that energy. That's why the moon, even though she has no light of her own, also has a great store of this energy we can tap into. We have gravity as well. It's very much so lesser, but anything with mass has its own gravity. And that can fall in line with the animist belief that this force, this energy, permeates everything, and it's what gives everything its own spirit, its own soul. In traditional witchcraft, the serpent's force is something that you use to help supplement your personal power. It is something that you go out and you use your tools to collect and store this power. You walk the serpent lines and you collect this power in order to use later for your big rites, your big healings, your big curses, whatever. And for those practitioners that like to look down on the crystal loving practitioners, which I used to be one of those types, that would look down on them and think it was something fake. In Jim McGarry's Traditional Witchcraft, A Cornish Book of Ways, she goes into the historical records of how these practitioners would find quartz in their environment and use that to store the serpent's force, as it is believed that quartz crystals will attract and store it naturally, and that their holy sites, their locations of immense power and their beliefs also happen to have a high quartz content for that area. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether you reach out to the higher realms to call down that light that is that fifth element, that power source to help empower your right, or whether you reach deep down into the earth and pull up that light to use as a power source and empower your rights, or whether you reach up and down simultaneously and pull up and pull down both. It's the same power. It might have a slightly different flavor, but it can still be used for the exact same thing. And that is what I like to use my wand for. I know that some traditions will assign it the element of air or fire, but those are the two elements that are the most like the quintessence. I like to use my wand as a physical representation of the Axis Mundi, of that divine source. I use it to help reach up or reach down and call upon the sources that I'm wanting to channel. You can do all of this without tools. I am not saying the tools are absolutely necessary, but they do help. People that see other practitioners using staffs or wands, which a wand is just a smaller staff, they both serve the same purpose. But people that look at other practitioners using those and say that, oh, they're just playing Harry Potter, or there's no power behind that ritual tool, it's all in the mind, are completely ignoring all of the historical evidence we have of various magical traditions that utilize staffs and wands. A lot of modern magic is tailored after ceremonial magic, which is tailored after the Kabbalah. But if you look at the legends, if you look at the mythos, if you look at different areas and you want to see a sorcerer of great power, or sorceress, or enchantress, or whatever, they almost always have some ritual tools that go along with it. In Norse magic, in Seder, they use staffs. In the King Arthur legends, Merlin's staff and wand was made from lignum vitae, which is one of the hardest woods out there. But it's a pattern that keeps popping up. So if there was no power behind using these tools, why did they use them? And I'm not saying that older magic is better magic, but it is possible that they had a better grasp of it back in the day, because the current religious mindset of science is very toxic to the magical mindset. Anything that you can't see and quantify doesn't exist. Back in the day, magic just permeated everything. The fairies, the spirits, they were just neighbors. Maybe not everyone worked with it or them, but if they needed something, they went to someone who did. So older is not necessarily better, but you can't completely disregard what they did in the past, since they lived and breathed a world of magic. They didn't have to worry about the modern world getting in their way until, Christianity came along and told them, like, you can't do this unless, you want trouble. But this is a subject that I can rant and rave about all day. It is something that is my favorite thing to discuss with other practitioners whenever they ask me how I practice. But so let's move on to the next topic, and that is circles and compasses. What are they, and what are their differences? What are their similarities? Now, a circle is what you tend to find in most of modern magic, thanks to Wicca and its influence in the modern magic movement and everything. A circle is a great tool to use. It is. It is a boundary that you create. You are creating a liminal space, a space in between, that puts up a barrier against any malefic forces, any negative spirits, any negative energies. The only thing inside of it is you and your magic and what you choose to invite into your space. It also contains the energy until you send it out. Now, some circle casting techniques, you only work with the 4 elements, and you call the quarters. And you can do this whether you are secular or you choose to call on spirits. Some people, whenever they cast their circles, they call upon the watchtowers, which there's one in every element. And essentially the watchtower is just the embodiment of the perfect good of that element, and it keeps out any of the unsavory bits from your ritual from slipping through that particular gate. Now, you can do this yourself by when you are setting down your barrier, because first things first, draw your circle on the ground. And I don't mean it has to be in chalk, it doesn't have to be even physical, but you'll want to use your ritual knife for this, your athame. You can use your wand, of course, But I use my athame, and it traditionally is done with an athame because the athame, you clear away the space. You make it neutral, so that way you can build up from ground zero. But when you are walking around your space, whether you have your athame up, like held out from you, or whether you are crouched over and you're lightly dragging it on your carpet or floors, or even if you go out in nature and in the traditional witchcraft way of things, you stab your athame into the ground and you physically dig a small circle around you and you're working. But when you are drawing and you are envisioning your energy coursing out of you in order to create that line, you state that nothing negative, nothing that will harm you or your magic may cross this boundary. And when you are done circling your area and you connect the line, see it flare up in your mind's eye, knowing that it is connected and whole, and nothing will penetrate it that will harm you or your magic. But you will, depending on your own tradition, of course, you call the elements to represent themselves. And I've seen some circle casting techniques that use just earth, wind, fire, water. And then other circle casting techniques that call upon earth, wind, fire, water, and spirit. It all just depends on your tradition, your personal practices. A lot of rituals that I see, you always start in the east. And I kind of touched on that in the episode with the element of air. I think it is personally because your spoken words will be traveling on the air currents. Your magic will be traveling through the air, and so you start with air first for that reason. Whether that is your own personal belief or that is your own way of practicing, that's neither here nor there. There is no rhyme or reason behind certain elements that you start with first. Some circle casting I've seen starts in the north and earth first. Do what makes you comfortable, what in your head makes sense, and the magic will follow. But that's basically it. That's the bare bones of a circle. It is a space you are creating, a sphere, a protective bubble that no longer exists entirely in this realm. When you finish casting your circle, you will be in between. You'll be a step in and a step out of this reality. And I know it's all very symbolic, but I will kind of say something, some merit, and it might sound like I'm a little crazy here, but I have literally had rituals to where I've cast my circle and I've locked myself away in my temple room, because I have my own room that I use for my magic, but I'll lock myself away in my temple room. And I think, me personally, that it was a very quick ritual, that I had only been in there for 30 minutes. And whenever I am done, and I dismiss the elements, and I deconstruct my circle, and I leave the room, I'll ask my significant other at the time that, how long was I in there? And they'll tell me, because I don't have my phone in my ritual space. I don't take any electronics with me inside. But they'll tell me that I was in there for a couple hours, when I had thought I was only in there for maybe 30 minutes. And, that can be explained away as like maybe I just hyper-focused and so I was in the zone or whatever. But that's just something that I think is really interesting, because there have been other times when I am working with the para elements of fire, because I'm creating a servitor of flame, of fire, because a servitor is an artificially created being, an elemental essentially, that the magician creates for a specific programming, and it carries out your will based on what you program it with. Well, this particular one I wanted to really be tied to the element of fire, and I was in my air-conditioned room in a shirt and shorts, and yet while I was working with the element of fire, and I didn't have a big bowl of alcohol that I had lit on fire, which sometimes I do. I just had 3 candles on my altar, and they weren't large, they were just taper candles. And I'm pouring sweat because it feels so hot in my circle. So circles are useful in focusing your will, focusing your intent, in creating the magical space that you're wanting for your magic. Now, compasses are both the same and a little different from circles. A compass still serves the purpose of creating kind of a space in between. It still serves the purpose of protecting you from negative sources, because you're still laying down that barrier, that circle, but the construction of it is a little different. When you cast a compass, you're not really focusing on just creating a protective sphere. You're not really just clearing away the energetic debris. What you're doing when you cast a compass is you are creating a crossroads. You walk the lines between the elements, and you circle around, so that way you're not messing up the lines, but it'll be a circle with the cross in it when you are finished. And in that middle is where you perform the magic. You are creating a crossroads. And one of the people that I very much so like their method of casting a compass is Keldon, who is another traditional witchcraft writer. In Keldon's eyes, and in Keldon's method, when you create your lines, to create your crossroads, and you see them coming from the east, north, west, and south, and bisecting in the middle of your circle, you're then going to see a line of energy. You reach up and you reach down. Because not only does Keldon create a crossroads for here, which every crossroads that we have has magical significance. But he's going a step further, and he's connecting to the higher realms and the lower realms in order to create a crossroads of even greater significance, in my own personal opinion. Now, I personally believe that crossroads hold their magical significance because it's an area where two separate paths cross, and so in the center it creates turbulence. Because in a perfect world, those roads would just go to and fro their direction and never have any other interaction, right? But when those two paths cross, and one is going to and fro one direction, the other one's going to and fro another direction, where they bisect is where their order is interrupted by a little bit of chaos. So it creates turbulence in that area. It creates a little chink in the armor, a little weak link in reality. Now, and this is where, in the previous episodes of the elements, I said that I can see some merit in having two diametrically opposing elements directly across from one another in casting your circles or compasses like Jim McGarry has, even though maybe it's just because she assigned the directions to the elements just for their area significance. But when you have those two directly opposing energies and they clash in the center, you're creating more turbulence because those energies will want to cancel each other out if they can. We're going to come back to that just so that way I can iron out the basics of circles and compasses and their techniques, and then come back to it a little later in this episode and really kind of talk about some things that may not be 101. But when you cast your compass, it doesn't matter which direction you start in, but you will be calling upon the elements to represent themselves. And I definitely like Keldon's way of doing it. I still envision gates for myself opening for the elements, but I do see that beam of elemental light coming from that gate, that direction that I call on. So if I start in the east and I call upon air and I see that gate open, when you start, when you are calling upon these elements, you need to focus on how that element feels. Remember in the previous 2 episodes how I gave a brief overview of how the elements feel energetically for me. When you call upon them, you need to wait until you feel that energy answering your call before moving on to the next one. When you make your rounds and you do air, fire, water, earth, or whatever order you assign them, you need to make sure each one answers your calls, or you are pulling the blind energy of each element into your circle, your compass, whichever you decide to use, before you move on to the next one. Now, candles are a great way of anchoring that energy to that quarter, to that point. When you call upon that element and it answers your call, and you start to pull it in, you will anchor that energy to something in your circle, in your compass. You can do it all mentally, of course, but you're going to have to keep track of it. I personally use candles for the different elements, and most of the time they're color coded. Yellow for air, red for fire, blue for water, green or brown or black for earth. But when it answers your call, you will anchor that energy to the flame, so that way it can't snap back. And when that candle is lit, you'll know that as long as that flame stays lit, that element will be in place. I've known other practitioners that have physical representations of the elements in each of the quarters, and that they will light incense in air, one candle for fire, a vial of water. A lot of times they'll use like moon water, and either a crystal or a jar of dirt or something for earth. When all elements are in place, after you have drawn your line, because that's the first step, is you always draw your boundary so nothing negative can enter, and then you call your elements. When everything is done, you need to allow the dome to form, or the cone, depending on which tradition. Some have it as a dome, others have it as a cone of power, but you need to see your line spring up and down below you, above and below. You need to see your elemental barrier. I like to do it with hand movements. So that way I reach out. I don't touch the barrier, but I reach out and I raise my hands as I envision the dome coalescing above me, and then I lower my hands and I see the dome form below me. And then boom, your circle, your compass is now cast. Now, here's where we're going to branch out from the 101 a little bit. If you read Modern Magick by Donald Michael Craig, he talks about balancing the elements, and it is something that you should do eventually. But as I was discussing before about the diametrically opposing elements, when you call upon the elements and you balance them, because you step back once you've called on them all, and you feel each of the elements in turn, and you will equalize their forces. If air feels in greater quantity to Earth, you will then raise Earth's vibration, Earth's representation in your circle until it reaches the same pitch. When it comes to balancing, I tend to try to listen. I go off of feel, yes, but I also go off of pitch, and I wait until in my brain, in my head, I hear them reach the same volume, if that makes sense. But when they are properly balanced, it creates a battleground in the center. Now, the next step, and it is something that is also found in Modern Magic by Donald Michael Craig. And it's one of those things that, like, I started doing and then I read it and it's like, I'm not crazy. But when everything is balanced, the next thing you do is you take your circle, your compass, and you spin it. You nudge the energy to swirl. Clockwise, of course, because that's you raising the energy for building what you want. If you wanted to do like a curse, or sometimes even if you are only cleansing something, you can also go widdershins or counterclockwise. But you nudge the energy to spin. And Donald Michael Craig has a good exercise for that. You will need to feel it move, and you might get dizzy at first. Sometimes I still do, but when that energy is swirling, it creates a vortex, one that pulls down the energy from the higher realms, and it pulls up that fifth element from the lower realms. When the energy inside of your ritual space is moving and is swirling, you will feel it fill up with magic faster. And that's the merit that I see behind having two opposing elements facing one another in your circle or your compass, because it generates extra turbulence. It generates extra chaos in the middle. And I'm not saying chaos meaning everything's going to go to hell in a handbasket. What I mean by chaos is that quintessence, what makes magic volatile, what embodies pure magic, that force that the gods call upon, that they're made up of. It wants to become something. And it will become whatever's easiest to become, unless you iron it out through your words, through your will, through the accoutrements that you use in your rituals. When you iron out the channels, you have to dig the channels, otherwise the water flows over and it turns everything to shit until it forms its own channel through some weak links in the earth. You dig the channels for the magic to flow in so it reaches the pond you're wanting to fill. So it waters the crops you're wanting to water. Do the work. Lazy magic is messy magic. Before this episode gets too long, I'm going to leave y'all with that. Next week, I will have my first guest, Tamaska, who is based out of an area that I used to live in. He is a psychic investigator, a paranormal investigator. He also happens to use like Enochian magic. He's a Christian practitioner, and I think he'll be a great first guest to have on the show. If you have any questions for me, whether they are 101, advanced, or not, I hate using that word advanced, but 101 questions or what, please email me at gates.to.chaos@gmail.com. That's gates.to.chaos@gmail.com. I'll include the email in the description of the video. After our first guest, I would love to do another episode of paranormal encounters, and so if you would like to share any of your paranormal encounters with me so I can list them on this show, please email them to me at the same email that I had stated before. Feel free to give a like and a follow on YouTube, a review on Apple, or a like on Facebook. Help me feed the algorithm gods. As always, if you like what you're hearing, pull up a chair around the fire, stay for a spell, invite your friends to join us, help the community grow. Before the clock strikes 3, check to make sure your doors are locked. Ignore the scratching on the walls, the sound of footsteps down your halls, and always, in dire emergencies, utilize your blanket of safety. Stay safe, stay sane, and stay magical. And I'll see y'all next time.